Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my week number 9 wide receiver start or sit decisions for the 2024 fantasy football season, going in depth through every single matchup from Thursday Night Football on Halloween all the way up until Monday Night Football, and tell you guys whether I would start or sit the wide receivers in all of those games. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 9 wide receiver start or sit decisions for the 2024 fantasy football season. We begin with the Houston Texans at the New York Jumbo Jets to kick off the week on Thursday Night Football. Now for the Jets, even with the team looking super bad, shout out to McLovin, the arrival of Davante Adams, Garrett Wilson has still put up back-to-back games inside the top 24 with 8 or more targets in both games. Last week up against New England, he had 5 receptions on 8 targets for 113 yards. This week, if the Jets lose, they might as well head on into a darkness retreat. But as of right now, based upon the amount of volume that Garrett Wilson is receiving, I do believe you want to slot him in as a low-end wide receiver 1 to a high-end wide receiver 2 in this spot. Based upon what we have seen also out of Davante Adams, Garrett Wilson has been the one performing, and Adams has been down astronomical as the wide receiver 51 and 47. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like Davante Adams is washed by any means, and I do believe that something's going to change. He's going to keep getting better, but as of right now, I definitely think you want to rank Garrett Wilson ahead of Davante Adams, and I'm not comfortable ranking Davante Adams as a wide receiver 1, so Davante Adams will be chilling in the wide receiver 2 range. Then they have Mike Williams because Allen Lazard has been ruled out with the chest injury, and that will mean that Big Mike is going to be the wide receiver 3 on the team. In an alternate universe where maybe Adams is not on the team, then I would potentially be interested in playing Mike Williams, but we don't live in that reality, so Mike W is going to be a sit. For the Texans, everybody is hurt. Tank Dell really hasn't performed well at all this season, and honestly, we might have to give him a new name because Tank is an awesome name, and this poor bastard's only getting like 4 to 6 targets a game and not putting up great fantasy football production, even though last season, the guy was downright incredible. With no Nico and no Diggs, Dell needs to step up, and will he actually be able to do it is a very large question mark. The Jets defense is more fraudulent than Shohei Ohtani in the World Series, so I do believe that this isn't an impossible matchup for Tank Dell. With so many guys hurt, if he doesn't put up a top 24 game, then there is something wrong with him, so I do got him as a low-end wide receiver 2, and I do think he has the upside to finish inside the top 12. But again, I am going to be very honest and not just sit here and slurp on the guy and pretend like what we've seen this season didn't happen, because based on what we've seen this year, we shouldn't be the most confident. Now, Xavier Hutchinson will get elevated into a scenario to see a lot more looks, but ultimately, I do not trust him or John Mechie at all. Moving to the Sunday slate, we began with the Dallas Cowboys at the Atlanta Falcons, and CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott combined for a garbage time masterclass last week up against the Niners, and Lamb was the wide receiver 1 on the week, scoring damn near 40 fantasy points. 13 receptions on 17 targets for 146 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is great, right? But it's basically impossible for him to repeat that level of a performance this week. But up against the Falcons, I do believe that Lamb should make his mark inside of the top 5 at the wide receiver position, and I do feel very confident in ranking him as a locked and loaded top 5 wide receiver. Jalen Tolbert is going to be receiving anywhere from 3 to 6 targets most weeks, and with the Cowboys offense having whiskey dick and not really being able to get it up weekly, I just don't have any interest in Tolbert. If I had confidence in the Cowboys offense to put up big numbers, then I would be interested in Tolbert because he's the wide receiver 2 on the Cowboys. And the Cowboys, sure, they are frisky. They haven't completely rolled over and died. But as of right now, I don't want anything to do with Tolbert. Turpin is the wide receiver 3 on a Cowboys offense that is as uninspiring as it gets. So he is a clear sit for me. Drizzy, Drake, London, anyone who played him last week was very disappointing, right? You can smell it through the screen. It smells terrible. But he had 4 receptions on 6 targets for 34 yards as the wide receiver 63 up against the Buccaneers. Now, if you're going to panic after one down game, though, you are just being incredibly overreactive. London is a locked and loaded top 24 wide receiver 2 weekly and has the upside to rip off a top 12 game. Here up against the overrated Cowboys defense, Drizzy Drake London is a top 12 wide receiver for me. Darnell, here comes the Mooney. While Drake London went out and disappointed up against the Buccaneers, Mooney was the wide receiver number 13. He had 5 receptions on 7 targets for 92 yards, plus a touchdown, putting up top 24 numbers at a very reliable rate. Is unlikely for Mooney, right? Him being that super duper reliable condom wrap top 24 guy isn't the most likely. Now, is he going to put up games like that? Of course. Because Cole's Cash Kirk's looking good. Mooney's a talented player, but with London ahead of him, with Bijan percolating so well in the run game, him being that locked and loaded top 24 guy is unlikely. But as a flex or wide receiver 3 option, Darnell Mooney's a great start. Now, Ray McCloud has had 1 game this season inside of the top 38. And one of these games, I could really see him finishing inside the top 24, or maybe even ripping off a top 12 game due to how many targets he could receive. But with the targets fluctuating so heavily, I am out on Ray McCloud. Next up, we got the Denver Broncos at the Baltimore Ravens. Now, Courtland Sutton's going to be a start, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I love Courtland Sutton this week, like Courtland Sutton is this must-start wide receiver. Sutton had 8 receptions on 11 targets for 100 yards last week up against Carolina as the wide receiver 21. If you remember, the week prior up against the Saints, Courtland Sutton did diddly squat. I don't genuinely believe that Sutton is going to be this reliable option, but if Bo Nix continues to look sharp, and with Sutton being the number 1 guy, and this game potentially being high-scoring with the Broncos chasing and the Ravens putting up some solid points early, Sutton should be involved enough to be a high-end wide receiver 3. Again, there's clear risk here, though, because Sutton has been bouncing up and down. Troy Franklin had 2 solid games from week 6 to 7, but he did cool down last week. If Sutton becomes the number 1 guy, then I'm kind of just out on Franklin. Devon Vell had 3 or more targets in every single game that he's played, but against the Ravens defense, that to me looks a little bit frisky at times. I would rather just leave Vell on the waivers. For the Baltimore Ravens, Zay Flowers is the textbook definition of boom or bust, right? Every single week we talk about in the quarterback start sit video just how consistent Lamar Jackson is, right? We really give Lamar Jackson the Dick Suckaroo, the Gawk Gawk 9000 special, but Zay Flowers, while he does get a bit of the Hawk Tua, right? He's a guy that we talk about how, hey, he's very boom or bust, right? This is a guy that's either blowing the back out of the defense or blowing your back out without the use of lube because you started him. Last week was a great one for Flowers. He was the wide receiver 14 with 7 receptions on 12 targets for 115 yards. And as of right now, the way Harbaugh is talking about Deontay Johnson being in a smaller role as the wide receiver 3, now I don't know if I necessarily believe that, but in the first game, I do. So the matchup here up against Denver is very, very, very hard, but Zay Flowers is very involved, so I do believe he'll be a middling wide receiver 2, should have a top 18 game. Rashad Master Bateman did exactly what I said he was going to do last week, and that was fall off of the edge of the earth, Christopher Columbus style, right? He is having these solid games in a row, and everyone's like, oh, it's Bateman season, and I told you guys, Bateman is who Bateman is. Stupid is as stupid as, right? He's a guy that's going to randomly show up and ball out every couple of weeks, but he's not a guy you want to rely on, especially up against a great Broncos defense. Shout out Tony the Tiger. Like I was talking about with Flowers, Deontay Johnson is expected to have a smaller role early on and is working on punt returns, special teams, so you definitely don't want to start him just yet. Next up, we move to the Miami Dolphins at the Buffalo Bills. In Tua's return, Tyreek Hill was a disappointment, right? He did perform better than every other game with the shit tier quarterbacks the Dolphins were rolling out, but I was personally looking for a whole lot more. He was the wide receiver 35 in a great spot against the Cardinals with 6 receptions on 9 targets for 72 yards. This week up against the Bills, he is a clear must start. You are never going to sit Tyreek Hill with Tua Tagovailoa under center. But, and this is a big but, shout out Violet Myers, I feel as though with Hill's spotty past against the Bills And with Tua Tagovailoa's spotty pass against the Bills, I am not going to sit here and pretend like I'm super excited, like Tyreek Hill's a lock to finish inside the top 5 or anything like that. Again, Tyreek and Tua, they're a combo like peanut butter and jelly. They're great for each other. So I got Tyreek ranked inside the top 12, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend like that's some lock. Jalen waddled away, waddle. Just like Tyreek was a big disappointment last week. 4 receptions on 6 targets for 45 yards. Waddle should be fine this week, but again, the Bills own the Miami Dolphins, so I am far from excited. He is a high-end wide receiver 3 for me. Odell Beckham Jr. is going to be a sit. He has expressed to the media that he's disappointed with the Dolphins. You know what I'd like to say to you, Odell? I am disappointed with you. I am disappointed with your sorry play. You have 3 targets in 3 total games, and you haven't gotten a single catch. Sure, if Odell was Tyreek or Waddle and he was a little bit pissed off, I get it. But Odell, this isn't 2016 anymore, buddy. Go fuck yourself, okay? I'm mad at the Dolphins, but you're there. You're out on the field. Get open. It's really that simple. Hopefully you can start doing it, but you don't need Odell on your fantasy football team. He can go on a one-way trip to go fuck yourself, Phil, okay? I'm tired of this guy. Amari Cooper did not practice today with a wrist injury, and he was probably just cranking off to that tape up against Seattle because they destroyed Seattle, and he was not very involved in the game last week where they just dominated the Seahawks defense, chains and whip style. In Seattle, he had just 1 reception on 2 targets for 3 yards. If he is able to get going and he's able to increase his snaps like he did from week 7 to week 8, that's going to tell you that he's getting more and more integrated into the offense. I wouldn't hold my breath and claim Cooper is going to be a lock to bounce back in a clear top 18 option, but he's going to be a low-end wide receiver 2/high-end wide receiver 3 for me. A little Shakira. Even with Amari in town and Amari producing back in week 7, Khalil Shakir was a top 18 performer. And he was the top 10 wide receiver, the wide receiver 10 last week in Seattle. Back-to-back weeks with 7 or more targets, and this dude is going to eat the Dolphins alive, like his name was Jeffrey Dahmer, so he should end up being a low-end wide receiver 2. And as a Dolphins fan, I am just expecting us to get our blowhole blown out. So just like Shakir, Coleman has been eating like Eddie Lacy at a fucking Chinese buffet. Back-to-back games inside the top 18, and last week he was 5 of 7 for 70 yards and a touchdown. While I definitely have tons of question marks about how Coleman will potentially elevate his play into being a reliable wide receiver 1 at the NFL level due to his inability to separate, but he does make great success with the targets he gets. He's making contested catches, and I get it. Nick, one of Cooper, Shakir, Coleman are definitely going to disappoint. I get it, and Coleman would be the guy I have ranked the lowest in the wide receiver 3 range. I think if anyone was going to shit the bed, it would be Coleman, but it could also be Cooper, so I like them all due to their upside, because again, the Dolphins are just a sorry franchise. Next up, we got the New Orleans Saints at the Carolina Panthers. And before we break down this banger of a matchup, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and do end up enjoying them, please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below like it owes you some money. Leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton, whether you are new to the channel or not. And I would also like to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our partner over at Underdog. If you're new to Underdog and sign up using promo code Notorious or click on the link in the video description, you'll be able to claim your free pick, which on Thursday Night Football, CJ Stroud, higher than half a total yard. You match that with any of the players on the Jets or anyone playing on Sunday or Monday. And if both of your picks hit, you'll get 3 times what you put into your pick'em. If you put multiple other picks and all of them hit, you will get a higher payout on your pick'em. If you're watching this after Thursday Night Football and you're like, Nick, what happens if I sign up with promo code Notorious? Then you get a free pick. That's going to be a different either NBA player higher than half a total point or a different NFL player higher than half of a total yard, plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. So make sure you guys sign up using promo code Notorious to get your free pick, plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. So back on into things here. We got the Saints at the Panthers, and it's the return of the Mac, the return of Derek Carr. Allegedly. Chris Olave was the wide receiver 12 last week up against a stout Chargers defense. 8 receptions on 14 targets for 107 yards. Going up against a Panthers defense with Derek Carr more than likely suiting up. I like Olave as a low-end wide receiver too, strictly because of the amount of volume that he should receive and the low amount of competition around him. The biggest worry with Olave is that he already came out and said, I'm not going to wear the Guardian cap, and this motherfucker gets concussed at an incredibly high rate. I'm not making fun of him. I hope it doesn't happen anymore. It's sad when stuff like that happens to players. So I hope Chris Olave is okay. Knock on wood. We don't root for injuries, but I'm just saying he's not really helping himself out by not wearing the Guardian cap. But Olave, if he's playing, you're playing him. London Tipton's brother, Mason Tipton, put his tip into the Denver Broncos defense back in week 7, but he followed that up with just 2 targets in the following game against the Panthers. Even with Carr probably back, there's no need to play Tipton. With Bub Means probably not going to play with the ankle injury, that should give Marquez Valdes-Scantling his time to shine. But with that said, in 2024, we all know MVS isn't going to shine bright like a diamond. He's not going to shine much at all, so he's definitely not start-worthy. Xavier, somebody touch my leggett, looked good last week with 4 receptions on 7 targets for 34 yards. And he even found the end zone up against a strong Broncos defense. And without Deontay Johnson, one of Leggett or Jalen Cocker, I barely knew her, are going to need to step up and become the #1 wide receiver. So both of these guys have their value increase, right? These guys are both guys that I'd be happy to stash on my bench. With Bryce Young under center, though, I would rather watch and see what happens with them chilling on my bench over feeding them to the Wolves in my lineup and potentially having them disappoint, especially since the Saints defense is underrated. Now, Coker was the wide receiver 17 last week. He was 4 of 6 for 78 yards and a touchdown. Again, I want to see it before I fully believe in it, but if you had to throw one of these guys out there and I got to start one of them, it would be Jalen Cocker over Xavier Leggett. Jonathan Mandingo Mingo hasn't scored a point since week 6 and hasn't scored more than 6 points a single time this season. So you know what you're going to do? You're not even going to have him on your roster. Next up, we move to the Las Vegas Raiders at the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, Jacoby, regardless of how bad the Raiders offense is on paper and how bad the quarterback play is, without Adams, Jacoby Myers is the #1 wide receiver on this team. He should be seeing 7 or more targets in all games, and he was the wide receiver 20 last week up against a solid Chiefs defense. 6 receptions on 7 targets for 52 yards and a touchdown. The Bengals defense is levels below, classes below the Chiefs. So we should be able to get like a high-end wide receiver 3/flex game out of Mr. Myers. And we ain't talking about Michael. For Trey Tucker and DJ Turner, they're kind of 2 peas in the same pod, right? Every once in a while, due to them being fast and due to the Raiders having to throw a bunch because they're getting pounded from the back, how you like that in games and they're losing, that's good. One of them's going to have a fine game every once in a while, but with far and few targets in between, you're not going to rely on either guy, so you just don't want to be playing them. For the Bengals, Jamar Chase is one of those guys where if you have him, you know you're going to start him, right? You didn't have to watch today's video and be like, oh, Nick told me to start Jamar Chase. No shit, right? You knew you were going to start him. Last week, he was the wide receiver 8 up against the Phillies up against the Philadelphia Eagles, and whether or not Higgins is back, Chase is a must-start wide receiver weekly. He definitely will get a bump up on my rankings for going against a defense that couldn't stop Air Bud. So I got Jamar as a top 5 wide receiver because, again, the Raiders' defense is very bad, and you guys should have him ranked as a top 5 receiver as well. Higgins is dealing with a quad injury that held him out of last week's game. He was doing work on the rehab field today on Wednesday, so your guess is as good as mine if he does end up suiting up. I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sins, so I'm not going to give you either way. I probably lean towards him not playing. But with how the Bengals record is, they kind of want to pull out all stops to try to win at this point. So the Bengals have been a disaster this year. I get it. But Higgins has been very reliable as a wide receiver 2. So he should be a mid-range wide receiver 2 if he does get the start. Andre Yoshi Voss, in Higgins' absence, I was excited to play Yoshi, right? But he clearly wasn't excited for us to attempt to play him because the guy had 3 targets for 0 receptions, which equivalates to 0 fantasy points. If Higgins is out again, I am not optimistic anymore playing Yoshi Voss, and neither should you. Next up, we got the LA Superchargers at the Cleveland Browns. Ladd McConkey went ballistic up against the Saints last week in his best game of his young career. Wide receiver 2 going 6 of 6 for 111 yards and not 1, but 2 tugs against Cleveland. I do believe that he will take a step back, But with him being seemingly the wide receiver 1 on the team, he should be able to put up a respectable high-end wide receiver 3 game. The only thing that's really holding him back from me really banging the drum for him is the fact that the Chargers just love to run the ball so much. Joshua Palmer, I do actually believe that Palmer's a better player than the stat sheet shows. But ultimately, on such a run-heavy team, really only one wide receiver can be trusted, and his name is Ladd McConkey, so DJ Chark, baby Chark, would be a sit as well. Cedric Tillman has put up back-to-back top 10 games, and we need to throw some respect onto this guy's name, right? Back-to-back games inside the top 10, back-to-back games with 9 or more targets, and people are starting to call him the next Puka Nacua. They are starting to really slob on this guy's knob like corn on the cob, and I'm not ready to put the crown on his head like the Burger King guy on the plane, but I am ready to tell you that I do believe that Cedric Wilson deserves the respect. I'm not ready to, really suck him dry yet, give him the crown, Biggie Small style, but he should be a low-end to mid-range wide receiver 2, which is much higher than the expert consensus rankings on Fantasy Pros have him. So Jerry Jeudy, the Chargers allow the least amount of points to wide receivers per game, which is why I didn't really want to get super aggressive with Cedric Tillman. And it's why I'm low on Jeudy, despite me believing that Jameis taking over this offense is going to lead the offense to just be way, 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 way better. Multiple of these guys can eat in every game. In better matchups here, Jeudy would be a start. But against the Chargers, a little too dangerous. A little spicy, like the Danger Witch, so I'm not playing him. Elijah Moore has been a top 28 receiver in back-to-back games, which is evidence that Jameis is really good, because prior to this year, I would have said that Elijah Moore was one season away from getting shipped off to Canada to join the Hamilton Tiger Cats. With all that glazing that I just did for Elijah Moore, though, again, in a tough spot against the Chargers, I'm not going to get cute and play him. Next up, we got the left hands up. Who are we? The Commanders at the New York Football Giants in MetLife. Now, Terry McLaurin, even with a banged-up Jaden Stormy Daniels and against a rock-solid Bears defense, Terry was still able to put up the wide receiver 18 game with 5 catches on 8 targets for 125 yards. And against the Giants defense, that should not scare you at all away from Terry McLaurin putting up yet another top 24 showing, something that he has done in 5 out of 8 games this season. With multiple top 18 games, Terry should continue the solid production this week, and I got him inside of the top 12 as a low-end wide receiver 1. Noah Brown scored on that crazy Hail Mary miracle. It was awesome to see for Noah Brown. It was awesome to see for the team, but pulling a rabbit out of his ass to get a lucky touchdown is very unlikely to happen going forward. He's a 3 to 4 targeted guy a week, and the gut tells you to sit him. Luke McCaffrey's a fine player at this point in the season, but Noah Brown has clearly surpassed LMC, and he's not put up a top 50 game once this season, so you're going to leave him on the waivers. Malik Neighbors has now disappointed in 2 games in a row, and it has me a little bit nervous that we might have placed the crown on Malik Neighbors' head a little bit too early. Now, obviously, he's incredibly talented, but with Daniel Jones sucking more cock than your average OnlyFans star, I am a little bit more worried now. I'm a little bit more pessimistic. Now, Neighbors is still going to get fed, and with the upside of 3 top 6 games in a row that he's already done this season, he should be able to get back to his old ways up against the Commanders. But I think locking him in is like this clear, stone cold Steve Austin top 5 option is a little foolish. Last time these two teams played, Neighbors piped down the Commanders as the wide receiver 3 with 10 catches for over 120 yards and a touchdown. So hopefully the bounce back is here, and I've got him as a mid-tier wide receiver 1. Juan Dale, shout out to Pitbull. If you want to play him, I get it, right? He's going to get you 8 to 14, 16-ish points per week. But with Daniel Jones not really looking good at all recently, and with the Commanders' defense seemingly looking better, the upside of Wandale is very capped because he's very unlikely to score a touchdown. I just don't think it's... Look, if you're down bad and you have to play Wandale, he's going to be fine, right? He's not going to completely destroy you, but he's also probably not going to take you over the top to be the reason why you win. Now, Darius Slayton was the wide receiver 28 last week. He had 4 receptions on 7 targets for 108 yards. But with Neighbors and Wandale going to out-target him in a majority of weeks, and again, not to just completely bash on Daniel Jones. He already gets so much bashing. There's nothing sexy about playing Slayton with Daniel Jones, so I'm going to sit him. Next up, we got the New England Patriots at the LA Titans. Now, if Will Levis ends up starting, run away at the speed that Tyreek Hill runs away from his baby mamas after impregnating them, because with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Mason Rudolph under center, Ridley's going to be able to get 8+ targets weekly. But with Levis under center, you can basically throw that baseline of targets out the window. Last week, he was the wide receiver 5. Now, do I think he's going to do that again? Fuck no, baby. But in a game where the Titans got dominated like Japan in the Battle of Midway, Alvin Ridley went 10 of 15 for 145 yards. I might be stupid, but I do know what love is, Jenny. I used to be a little bit better at the voice, and there's already people in the comments, Nick, stop doing stupid accents. I will not. Very nice. All right, I really don't believe that he's going to end up doing that again, but because of his ceiling, he's like a wide receiver 3/flex dart throw. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, NWI, has scored a touchdown in 3 straight games, but with him more than likely seeing just like 3 or 4 targets a week, it's very unlikely that he can keep up this pace. Stay away from him as he's a clear trap. Shout out Admiral Akbar. Tyler, yeah, Boyd gets more targets than Westbrook, but he has been outscored by him over the last 3 games. I have no interest in Tyler Boyd, and neither should you. For the Patriots, DeMario time ran out as bro was finished outside the top 70 in 2 straight games. While I am a believer in Douglas and in the play of Draco May, more than likely Drake May will not be able to get the go and Jacoby will be in, which is a recipe for disaster for this whole entire offense. Even if May does play, though, I want to see more reliability out of DeMario before I can play him. Especially because it's not like they're going up against some shit tier defense. Like the Titans defense is sneakily pretty good. Now, Kayshon Boutte, despite the fact that his last name sounds like Booty, he's actually better than that. With that said, though, he's only finished inside the top 50 once and probably will only see like 2 to 3 targets. So I'm not going to justify starting him. Kendrick Bourne hasn't scored more than 3 points this season, and I don't even think Drake May can give him a little revive and save him. I don't even know if Patrick Mahomes could save him, so there's no need for him to be anywhere outside of the waivers. Next up, we got the Chicago Bears at the Arizona Cardinals to kick off the 4 p.m. slate following the witching hour. Now, wiki, DJ Moore has absolutely fucked us in back-to-back weeks, and I feel like we need to start taking away the respect. Like, we've given players the respect, we knight them, right? We introduce them to our mother. We're like, oh, we have some great respect for this guy or gal, obviously in our scenario here, but DJ Moore, what the fuck, man? What the fuck? I love DJ Moore, but until Caleb can consistently put up numbers, I can't really slide for DJ Moore as much as I was previously. Back-to-back games with 5 or fewer targets, and while he was the wide receiver 6 just 3 games ago, that feels like a long time ago in fantasy, so there's no need to get too high for DJ Moore. He's a fine low-end wide receiver 2 for me. For Keenan Allen, he led the team in targets last week, but only had 2 receptions for 39 yards on his 7 targets. He's old. That was a cold game, maybe too cold for him. This game will be in Arizona, so it won't be as cold. But Keenan only has 1 game inside the top 50. I get this is a great matchup for him, but I just don't have it. I don't have the balls to play him. Rome Odunze is the wide receiver 3 here on this team, and until the team decides to actually push him up into being a reliable weapon, then we're not going to start him. It's really as easy as that. For the Cardinals, Marvin Harrison Jr., Maserati Marv, he earned his nickname back, right? We stole his nickname away. We called him Mazda Marv, right? And now, Miata Marv, and now he gets his nickname back, right? Maserati Marv. He was the wide receiver 4 up against my Dolphins, and he went to Pound Town against us, right? In Miami, 6 receptions on 7 targets for 111 yards and a touchdown. I will note that his usage, if you look at I don't know what you exactly call the map of it, like off the top of my head. There's a map after every game where it shows you all the routes the receivers ran, and the routes Marvin Harrison Jr. was running are the routes you want Marvin Harrison Jr. to be running, right? You don't want him just fucking running fast as fuck, right? I'm fast as fuck, boy, like Keemstar in that video, right? You don't want him just running at the speed of light straight down the field. That's not really his play. Now, he can do that, obviously, but you don't need him running 50-yard gashers every play, right? You want to get them over the middle of the field, and that's what they were doing, and Marvin Harrison succeeded because of that. Now, I don't want to suck him off too hard, though, metaphorically, of course, as he's been very up and down this season, but the Bears' defense is great, so I'm not going to get too hot on Marv, but I do like him as a high-end wide receiver, too. Michael Wilson found the end zone last week as the wide receiver 29, which is cool and all, and I think in more positive matchups, if you're down bad at wide receiver or flex, you could take the half-court shot on Michael Wilson, but against the Bears, this is a strong fuck no, baby scenario. You're going to sit him. Greg Dortch has been demoted at the hands of Wilson to being like a 2-target-per-game guy, and with Trey McBride feasting, no need to play him. Next up, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, for Brian Thomas Jr., initially the fear was that Brian Thomas Jr. would have suffered a severe chest injury like that guy in the Salem witch trials, right, where they put that rock on his chest and it just crushes him. I remember reading that in high school. You all read that. You paid attention. So that's a reference for everyone, right? Not all the references everyone's going to get, right? I shouted out Optic Scumpy a couple days ago. I don't think everyone used to watch like Call of Duty Pro matches, but I think everyone's read that book. So everyone should get that one. Just like my other reference where we always talk about how like guys are taking you out back and shooting you while you're tending to rabbits. Shout out to Lenny from Of Mice and Men. But he is now considered day-to-day, which gives him a chance to play. Now, again, it's important to note that I said chance. I didn't say, oh, he's going to play. So if you have Brian Thomas Jr., you want a backup plan. But if he is playing without Christian Kirk, Brian Thomas is going to see a clear bump in targets. He has been a reliable wide receiver 2 in most games, and he's had 3 games inside the top 10. If he goes, then I got him as a solid mid-range wide receiver 2. If he misses, then guess what? You don't want to play him. Gabe Davis, even if Brian Thomas Jr. misses and Kirk is obviously done for the year, I would rather stand in front of Tiger Woods and let him just shoot a ball directly into, like, right between my fucking eyes, right? I would rather have that happen, a permanent headache, or maybe even death, right, over that. Gabe Davis is terrible. He's dealing with a shoulder injury, and even in his best spots, he's failed us. So don't ever play Gabe Davis. Parker George Washington will attempt to lead the Jaguars if BTJ doesn't go. But even so, the Eagles defense is looking a lot more gooder. They're looking a lot better, which makes me feel like Washington is a bust waiting to happen. A.J. Brown, while the Eagles thumped the Bengals last week in Cincy, the only players that really had fun was Jalen Hurts, who ran in 3 touchdowns, and Devontae Smith, who found the end zone. A.J. Brown was chilling, kind of in the cuck chair. He's the wide receiver 33, 5 receptions on 6 targets for 84 yards. Now, prior to last week, he had 3 straight top 8 performance games with a touchdown in every single game. So A.J. Brown's going to shake it off and slap up the Jaguars defense, backhand Djokovic style, up against the Jaguars as a clear top five wide receiver. Devontae Smith, after a complete and utter flop in week 7 where he scored 0.8 fantasy points, he went balls deep into the Bengals defense until they called him daddy in that spot. Like, he was going crazy. Wide receiver 7 with 6 receptions on 7 targets for 85 yards, and a tug playing up against the Jaguars has me very confident, puffing out my chest and saying that he's going to be a top 12 wide receiver. Jahan Dotson hasn't scored a fantasy point since week 6. I won't waste my breath yapping about him. You sit him. Next up, we got game number 12, the Detroit Lions at the Green Bay Packers. Now, despite the Lions pulverizing, beating the Titans to a pulp, I don't like pulp. I said no pulp. Shout out Tony. Amon-Ra St. Brown had just 2 catches on 2 targets for 7 yards, some pulp, and a score. Jared Goff threw 3 touchdowns and under 100 yards. This week against the Packers, I expect them not to throw the ball more. 5 straight games with a touchdown for Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he will once again be ranked as a must-start top 6 wide receiver. You can't convince me otherwise. Now, Mia Khalifa Raymond scored last week, marking back-to-back games with a touchdown. Round of applause, but with so few targets coming his way, I will turn the other cheek when it comes to starting him. Tim Patrick had just 1 target last week, and even with Jameson Williams gone, I don't expect him to get fed. Sit him down. For the Packers, Jaden Riley-Reed has shit the bed in back-to-back games with 3 points and then 7. So it wasn't just like, oh, only got me 10 points. That's not good. That's not what I'm expecting. No, you scored 3 and 7 points. That equals 10. 10 points in 2 games. That's just not very good. So with just 3 and 4 targets in those games, if Willis starts, I am not playing Reed. because when Willis played, Reed had 8 targets total, not in both games. 8, 8, 8, and 8. I ate till I got sick on the floor. 8 times 8 equals 64. No, 8 total. 2 games for just 59 yards. Now, I love Jaden Reed. I do. But I'm not biting that bullet. But if Love does play, he's a fine wide receiver too. Romeo Doubs went from really hot, fortune hot for 2 straight games. Then he came back down to slightly above room temperature, right? He didn't completely ream you, but it wasn't a great game. If Love starts, I will bounce Doubs up into being a lower end start, but I really don't believe he's going to at this point. So that makes him a sit. But again, monitor the situation because I've thought people were going to sit and they start. I've thought people were going to start and they've sit before. They've sit before. They've sat before. Christian Watson hasn't had a huge game yet this season. I don't expect it to come against the Lions, so we sit him. Next up, we got the LA Rams at the Seattle Seahawks, the final game before the 2 primetime games. For the Rams, Puka hit the Vikings like how Alex Pajeda hit Jiri. He hit him like Ilya hit Max Topuria. How Ilya hit Max Topuria. That makes sense, Nick. His name's Max Holloway. The best is blessed. Puka was blessed. 7 receptions, 9 targets, 106 yards as the wide receiver 15. 2 carries for 5 yards as well. I still do believe that Kupp is going to out-target him most weeks. But, Puka did look to be more involved and more healthy compared to Cooper Kupp. Going forward, though, you obviously want both in your lineup. I got Puka ranked as a low-end wide receiver 1. Kupp returned last week, just like Puka, and Kupp was the wide receiver 25. He played 58% of the snaps. Puka played 57. I expect both to continue to get ramped up in terms of snaps and targets and all because they're both coming off of not severe injuries, right? Because they came back, but not great injuries, right? They didn't stub their toe. They didn't get a fucking paper cut, right? They were out for a bunch of games. So Kupp did disappoint me last week based upon how I ranked him, but he didn't disappoint us like in a huge way. He was fine. Against the Seattle defense that is worse than expected, I've got Kupp in the wide receiver 2 range, the high-end wide receiver 2 range, and you can argue him all the way up to being a low-end wide receiver 1. DeMarcus Robinson, go to Marcus, scored 2 touchdowns on 3 targets for 35 yards, which is good, right? Good game, but he's playing 85% of the snaps, and that number will likely dip with Kupp and Puka ramping up further, and with D-Rob failing to command targets without Kupp and Puka even playing for a lot of the season, you cannot play him. For the Seattle Seahawks, JSN is going to be a start. Now, Metcalf could return to practice tomorrow on Thursday after suffering an MCL sprain and missing last week. If he plays, you play him. No ifs, ands, or buts like Miley Cyrus about it. If he misses, you rank JSN slightly higher. He is going to be a fine wide receiver 3/flex even in bad games, and a fine matchup here against the Rams. I've got him in that wide receiver 3/flex range. For Tyler Lockett in my pocket skirt, it's hard to ever really want to start him because he's going to get you 8 to 12 points, sure. But there's such little touchdown upside. We say this every single week. He's the definition, Webster's Dictionary. Go on Google, type in business decision. He is the definition of it. He gets the ball, and instead of trying to do some pizzazz, right, shake a guy off, right, break their ankles, what he's going to do is just fall over, fall asleep, Snorlax style, right? He's not going to go out there and hurdle someone. He's not going to do anything crazy. If he catches the ball near the side of the field, right, close to the out of bounds, close to the numbers, he catches the ball, and if there's one guy in front of him, it's like, okay, you know what? Lockett could probably get past this guy. He just goes up, out of bounds. Oh, I got my catch. That's all good for me. I get it. He's old. He had only 3 targets last week without DK, and I'm just uninterested in starting a guy with the upside, with like limited upside. So I'm not starting him. Jake Bobo has an awesome name. Hey, boo boo, want to take a look at my picnic basket? But just because you have a cool name doesn't mean you're worthy of starting in fantasy. Back-to-back games with just 1 target. Sit him down. Next up, we move to, because you waited all day for Sunday night. And if you waited all day to watch this video, guys, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button down below if you're new, and ring that notification bell. Colts at the cold like Minnesota Vikings. Now, with cool Joe Flacco as the starter for the rest of the season, seemingly, Josh Downs is back to being a clear top 18 wide receiver. Last week, even with Richardson against the Texans, In Houston, he was the wide receiver 6 with 4 receptions on 9 targets for 109 yards and a touchdown. The skill has always been there for Josh Downs, but you had to panic because of how inconsistent Anthony Richardson was. With Flacco under center, I'm insanely confident in Downs going forward. This is a matchup that does knock him down a peg, right? The Vikings defense, I know they haven't looked the best recently, but they're one of the better defenses in the NFL, but he should be at least a low-end wide receiver 2 this week, which is where I got him. Michael Pittman Jr., just like with Downs, his value has skyrocketed with Flacco under center. Now, MPJ is a lower-end start compared to Downs, just based upon how the guys have performed with Flacco, but Pittman is still a fine wide receiver 3 weekly. In this matchup, it's bad, right? It's a bad matchup, so I'm not going to sit here and just say, oh, the Vikings haven't looked the best defensively over the last 2 weeks. Big difference in going against Stafford, and who did they play the week prior to that? Stafford, and it was, I think, the Lions. It was the Lions. Now you're going up against Joe Flacco. Big difference. So, Michael Pittman Jr., I'm starting him, but again, he's a lower-end type of start. Alec Pierce, the play from Richardson was, fuck it, Alec Pierce is out there somewhere. That was a go-to play for him. But with Flacco, it doesn't seem like that's going to be as much of the case. And against the Vikings defense, I just don't want to be playing Alec Pierce. For the Vikings, Justin Jefferson has been a top 24 wide receiver in every single game this season. And I remember all the comments all summer. Nick, you can't draft Justin Jefferson because of the quarterback play. Justin Jefferson isn't quarterback proof, even though you proved he was last year using all these stats all summer. I'm not going to draft him. You drafted Garrett Wilson instead, right? Great move. Now, I liked Garrett Wilson too, but would have been better to draft Jefferson. Now, again, I'm not trying to shit on your chest, Cleveland Steamer style, because I made bad decisions. But sometimes things are so obvious, right in front of your face, and we just try to swivel, we try to dodge, we try to zig when we should be zagging. We just try to get off of the easy play. Fantasy football is an easy game on paper, but we try to overthink ourselves. We try to galaxy brain ourselves in so many situations, like my Zamir White take. Zamir White was the quintessential bust. We see it every year. A guy has 4 or 5 good games, and then we want to draft him super high. It's obvious. Don't fucking draft him. And I still fell for it. Even though I said all summer, I think this could be a trap. That was like the mouse trying to grab the cheese, right? People fell off of the Justin Jefferson wagon for no reason. And even with back-to-back L's for the Vikings, Jay Jettas was the wide receiver 5 and 11 in both games. No need to go in depth on every single one of Jefferson's games. And oh, look at his route tree, this, that, and the other thing, right? He's fantastic. We know how good he is. He's going to dominate in any matchup, especially up against the Colts. So I got him as a top 5 wide receiver this week. I'm feeling real nicey about Justin Jefferson as a clear top 5 wide receiver 1. Jordan Addison-Ray, his usage in the Vikings offense is like very concerning. Besides one game, he's had 4 less targets in all other games. Addison is very skilled. He's very fast, and he could take those 3 or 4 targets for 80-plus yards and a touchdown. But when you're hinging on that big play touchdown on just a few targets, I just can't get in the boat of starting him. Jalen Naylor is actually getting more targets per game than Addison, which is insane. Insane in the membrane, but he's not actually better than Addison, so you'd sit him. Also, I don't know if this is true, because I saw the tweets, so the tweets are real. But Jordan Addison, maybe his uncle, his dad, Ron Stewart, sent this to me from his basement, and he sent it in our chat, and I was like shocked to read this. It was like Jordan Addison's like uncle or something, fucking tweaking out on Twitter about Addison's usage. And honestly, I get it, but that could be just a fake account. So next up, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Kansas City Chiefs to close out this video. Xavier Worthy is one of those guys that's a last-ditch play, right? He's one of those half-court, full-court moonshots that if you play him, you got to understand what he can do. He's fast. He's quick. He has the upside to score 30 fantasy points. But he also has the downside of getting like 3 or 4 or 5 fantasy points in any given game. He has had 8 targets in back-to-back games, but even with the big boost in volume, he has just one game where he was the wide receiver 31 against the Raiders. The other game, with all that volume, he's the wide receiver 55. The Bucs defense is straight cheek. Shout out to Lena Paul. So I do believe that Worthy can show out here. But due to him being very inconsistent, he's a wide receiver 3/flex dart throw. DeAndre Hopkins. D-Hop played just 32% of the snaps at his debut with the Chiefs against the Raiders. 2 receptions on 3 targets for 29 yards. He will eventually become the number 1 target on this team. And the matchup here is juicy. But until we see him actually put up numbers, again, he's like a Xavier Worthy last-ditch effort, and I have Worthy ranked ahead of him. For Juju Smith-Schuster, the TikTok king, Corvette. He missed last week with the hammy, missed the majority of the 49ers game the week prior with the hammy. I haven't seen much information on him. I scoured the internet, scurvaged, savaged. I searched the internet. I looted the internet for some information on Juju, and I honestly didn't find much. So I think we'll get some more clarity tomorrow. If he plays, I wouldn't start him, but I would bump the other guys down, knock him down. I guess bump normally means up, so I'm going to knock him down as Juju wins. He started. He was the wide receiver 13, so I could really throw a wrench into things. For the Bucs, Jalen McMillan was the wide receiver 1 without Mike Evans. But they also force-fed the ball to Cade Otton, and they could easily do that again. Back-to-back games with 7 or more targets, but he has yet to have a solid fantasy performance against the Chiefs' defense. I think you're being very ambitious if you try to play him. Sterling Shepard went 5 of 3 for last week, so 5 targets, 3 receptions. So I guess it should have been 3 of 5 last week for 18 yards. He might be better than McMillan due to his experience at the National Football League level. Sterling Shepard's been in the NFL for a while. But I don't really want to start any Buck against the Chiefs. That's a wide receiver. And if I was to start one, it would be McMillan. Trey Palmer is a 3 or fewer target guy per week. Again, we're not really trying to start receivers against the Chiefs on a Buccaneers offense that doesn't have the best wide receivers, so we're sitting them. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you didn't enjoy, make sure you guys do hit that subscribe button down below like it owes you some money. Leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. If you want access to my rankings as well as an answer to any of the questions you guys may have, check out the Patreon link in the video description for $7.50 a month. Make sure you guys also check out Underdog. I just threw up my fantasy football draft on the screen when I meant to throw up the Underdog graphic, but that's okay. That's a little error that happens. But if you're watching for 45 minutes and you're not on Underdog, make sure you guys check them out. Promo code Notorious. Get your free pick. CJ Stroud higher than half a total yard, plus a first-time deposit offer for up to $1,000 in bonus cash. I love you guys more than you'll ever know. We have almost reached 38,000 subscribers, and that is incredible. It is impossible without all your guys' support. I love you guys so much. So I hope you guys have a great one. We'll be back tomorrow with some videos and a live stream. Have a great one, as always. Good boy!